Well, hello, everyone. This is Suzette Chang with Dr. Robin Miles with Thick Descriptions and Elephant in the Room Unboxed. Thick Descriptions is an organization that disrupts traditional educational methods with anthropology, building stronger communities. And we have the pleasure of talking to Carlos Moreno. Are you a doctor, Carlos?
I am not.
Okay, all right. The
Yeah.
Really? Okay, you're working on
No, I mean, I'd love to, but if the opportunity presents
it?
itself.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. So, Carlos, tell us a little bit about you.
Mm. Yeah. Carlos Moreno. I grew up in Santa Clara, California. My mom's from Mexico City. My dad's family's from Abilene, Texas. And Yeah, grew up in the Bay Area. Moved to Tulsa in 1998. Was a web designer, graphic designer for many years. Went back to school after having dropped out for almost 20 years. I went back, finished my bachelor's degree, got my master's degree in public policy. And today I am the community affairs analyst for Family and Children's Services, working in their criminal justice division.
Very cool. And tell the audience a little bit about your community work.
Mm. Yeah, long time community volunteer. I think that comes from um, my family and just the examples that they set out for me. But yeah, I'm long time community volunteer and advocate for um, 12 years. I was on the board of a group called Tulsa Now, which advocated for better housing policies and just better urban development. And I also volunteered for an organization called Code for America. We did a lot of criminal justice work, which is kind of what led me to work for a nonprofit today. Um, I did a lot of freelance work in the Greenwood community, uh, especially for the Oklahoma Eagle, which is a black newspaper. And so I've also kind of been a long time volunteer in the Greenwood community here in Tulsa.
Mhm. Mhm. So let's go a little bit deeper in your involvement in Tulsa. I do not want to assume that anyone doesn't know about the 1921 Tulsa Massacre. Has received quite a bit of recognition in the last 10 plus years, give or take. Um, in the context of leadership, because I definitely view you as a leader, a community leader, how has your involvement in the Greenwood Tulsa massacre, how has your involvement within the context of leadership, how has that evolved?
Mm, mm. Yeah, when I first moved here, I moved here in 1998, and I didn't really have I didn't have any family, and I didn't have a lot of friends. But when I started kind of freelancing as a graphic designer, I ended up doing some work for the Oklahoma Eagle, and they're right on the corner of Greenwood and Archer, so right kind of in the heart of this community. And I started working for um, Jim Goodwin and his older brother Ed, who taught me, how to write articles, how to interview people, how to take photographs, how to just, you know, do everything related to the newspaper business. And just being there in the building and being in the neighborhood, I got to hear from a lot of the elders in the community, just as they would come in and out of the office. They would drop off a wedding announcement or a birth announcement or an obituary or talk to a journalist or get interviewed for this story or that story you know, um, or whatever it was. And just kind of by osmosis almost, just hearing these stories from the elders and hearing the stories from the community. I remember at the time, it was Representative Don Ross. And he had heard through a conversation that I was good with computers. So from then on, he would call me whenever his computer would break down. And, I lived clear on the other side of town. So I would have to get in my car, drive, you know, almost a half an hour to get to his house. And, this was at the time when, computers, like you could take parts apart and put them back together. And, so I would be installing a new hard drive or putting new memory or fixing the motherboard or the video card or whatever it was. And we'd have the guts of the computer all splayed out across his living room floor. And, as I was, tinkering with stuff, he would just tell me stories. Because what else are we going to do? We got nothing else to do to spend the time waiting for, Windows to boot up or whatever it was. But he would just tell me stories. And I can remember hearing stories from Mabel Little and Eddie Faye Gates and survivors of a massacre, and what that felt like for them and what they had to go through and what they had how they picked up the pieces afterwards and built, again. And things like that. And just, just for me, it just became a part of the story of this community that I was learning from and living in and working in. And so, even when I left and, went on to my own career and bigger and better things, I always took that with me, those stories from the community. And I collected every book, every article, everything I could get my hands on related to Greenwood, just because it was just interesting to me. And, like you said, it sort of hit the popular, culture or whatever, with Lovecraft Country, on HBO and The Watchmen and all these documentaries and movies. And all of a sudden it became, my friends from California, were, reaching out like, what is that? You live in Tulsa. What is this stuff that I'm hearing about all of a sudden? It's like, no, I've known about it for quite a long time. And so I ended up writing a book called The Victory of Greenwood, just to kind of have a place to collect all those stories that I had been told all those years, and to give a greater context to the neighborhood. Because when I looked at the bookshelf, all I saw were books about the massacre, and rightly so. Like, that's, we should focus on this event and understand it. But what I thought was lacking was a real context of this place, and that it is a neighborhood, and that it continues today, and that there is a continuum before 1921, during and then after 1921, and how did this neighborhood pick up the pieces and move on and continue to thrive. The economic height of Greenwood is actually in the 40s and 50s. And so what are the stories that we can tell about that? And, as I got my master's degree and started studying public policy, what are the policies, right, that led to the outcomes that you see in Greenwood today? There's over a 10-year life expectancy difference between North Tulsa and South Tulsa. And people point to, the massacre, and that certainly plays a part, but what are the policies that went into place? Things like redlining, things like housing discrimination, things like over-policing, over-incarceration. So that really opened my eyes to, looking at these things in a different light, having this community experience.
Carlos, is there one story that comes to mind? All those times that you were sitting there, listening to the gentleman, kind of really recount his experiences, or any of the, you know, folks that you talk to. Is there one story that stands out that has inspired you, that has been the wind beneath your wings, or that you often reflect on, that you feel like, that comes to mind that you can share?
There's many. And I'm just, as you ask the question, I'm kind of rolling around in my head all the different stories that I know. There's so many. But one that really opened my eyes, and it was connecting with a gentleman by the name of Emmett J. McHenry, um, who's still around. He lives in Virginia, um, and he grew up in Greenwood in kind of the 50s, so to speak, kind of around that time. And he graduated Booker T. Washington High School, and he went on to work for IBM. And after a series of events, he went on to win the government contract to be the sole provider for the domain registration system for the internet. So if you had a domain, a website in the 90s, you were buying it from Emmett J. McHenry. And to connect him and that story of his trials, his successes, how he was able to win this contract over and above Stanford University, and how significant that was, and what his story meant in terms of the sort of the greater picture of Silicon Valley, and that because I grew up in Silicon Valley, and so to be hearing from him and thinking about, well, my heroes were people like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak and Bill Gates and sort of the old white guys, of Silicon Valley, and to hear like, no, that's not just a story that belongs there. That's a story that many, many, many other people are connected to, even here in Tulsa. So the guy who is responsible for the domain name registration system for the internet is from here in Tulsa. And that actually inspired me to go back and interview my grandmother, because I wanted to hear a little bit about her story. I knew that she worked for a company in San Jose called the Burke Rubber, but I didn't really understand what she did. Growing up, you never ask your grandma, like, what did you do? She was retired. Like, what did you do when you worked? It's just not a question that occurs to a child. But I went back and I asked her, like, tell me more about your job and what you did. And she was a quality control supervisor for these parts that were made for the nuclear energy industry. And so when I think about that, it's like, that is a very, very technical job. If that part is not right and it goes into a nuclear power plant and something happens, like, that's, literally it's a matter of life and death, and she told me about the tools that she had to use and these giant magnifying glasses that she had to use, and how technical it was, and how she had to get the precision just right, and her kind of climbing that corporate ladder of, having this position and then managing her team and then managing the entire division by the time that she retired. And for a single, Latina mother, that's pretty significant, and just hearing about her stories. And her sister, my aunt Terry, worked for Hewlett Packard. And so, like, you think about these internet giants, right? But like, they stand on the shoulders of all these other people,
100%,
and all these other people that look like us, right? 100%. And so like we're a part of that story too. And like, for example, the movie Hidden Figures, right? Yeah. It's like, yeah, they were hidden because it was the men, who wanted to take the credit, but it was all the math that those hidden figures, when they were doing, that led them to be able to, get to the moon.
Yes, I love that, because it's so connected to the kind of the mission and vision for Thick Descriptions, our focus on STEM, and supporting our kids and their parents with understanding that not only do we want to support with helping them to make that contribution to history, but also helping them to learn that we have made a significant contribution to that history.
Yeah.
Agreed. Agreed. And I love how, Carlos, so agreed with what you say, Dr. R, and also love how you lead through storytelling, Carlos.
Mm.
That's very powerful. And very much in agreement with you of our history is that, regardless of who the history about, American history, it's there. And we cannot suspend people in history. We continue to live and have experiences that build upon those histories. And so applaud you for saying, hey, there's a lot of stories that are going in my head right now.
Mhm.
This needs to be documented. Not only does it need to be documented, we need to honor the stories of those that led and again, in your own way of leading as well. So thank you. Very cool. Very, very cool.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, right before we pressed record, you were talking about something that, and I also see this in the spirit of leadership, something that you have been involved in for about 10 years. Would you share what you're comfortable sharing about that that part of leadership for you?
Mhm. Yeah. So about 10 years ago, um, a man by the name of Terence Crutcher was murdered by a police officer. Her name was Officer Betty Shelby. And
In Tulsa.
what's that? Oh, yes, here in Tulsa. And he was driving home from attending community college. Had some car trouble. Was stopped by the police. They asked him to raise his hands. He raised his hands, and they shot him. And at the time, the city of Tulsa said, "We will launch an investigation." They didn't. We will hold Betty Shelby accountable. They didn't. And so his twin sister, Tiffany Crutcher, founded a nonprofit organization called Terence Crutcher Foundation to not just to fight this injustice that was on her brother, but to tackle some of the broader injustices that have been going on in North Tulsa. So, disinvestment in the community, over policing of the community. And so the Terence Crutcher Foundation has really been this sort of like model of a grassroots organization that they literally knock door by door in the community, asking about what people need, asking about how they can help. They have spun up a lot of youth programs. I have done a tiny bit of volunteer work for Terence Crutcher Foundation, but more than anything, I've just really kind of followed the story and kind of kept in touch with Tiffany, and just kind of I am a correspondent for a radio show called Focus Black Oklahoma, and I've told a couple of stories, and just kind of really I try to keep tabs on the community and understand what's going on and what are the issues and what's Terence Crutcher Foundation fighting for and what are the things that they're doing in the community and how are they helping and things like that. Today, the 10th Circuit Court ruled that qualified immunity does not apply in the case of in this case, and that Betty Shelby needs to face trial for shooting Terence Crutcher. So it's a pretty significant ruling. I think it has the potential to change some of the ways that qualified immunity will apply. And so it's not just big for Tulsa, but it's big for kind of the country. I think about the ways in which policing through ICE, for example, is used sort of like outside the boundaries of the Constitution, right? It doesn't matter whether you're a citizen or not; they're going to arrest you and take you away from your family anyway. And it's like, no, police officers really need to abide by the Constitution just like the rest of us, And so I think it's a case that has a lot larger implications.
Huge, because, when you think about the origin story of policing in our country, right? And the origin story of it is exactly what's being played out today, right? And so, yes, for this court to rule in this way is pivotal, especially in our current climate.
Yeah, I agree. And it's almost it's so weird to say this, but having working today in the criminal justice system as I am, I work for a court-ordered diversion program for women who suffer substance abuse issues. Um, this sort of over policing and the reaction is like um, the reaction to throw people in jail or prison for any reason. 50% of civil cases in Oklahoma are what's labeled as indebtedness. So if you think about 50% of civil cases are simply because people don't have enough money. They're in debt, so they are facing a fine or a fee. They this happened to me. I got a ticket for speeding, which fair. I was breaking the law. I deserved to have that fee against me because I broke the law and I was being a dangerous driver. But what I didn't know is that there was when I paid the fee, there was a technical issue with it and the check did not go through. And so there was a warrant for my arrest.
Wow.
And I didn't know that. So the next time that I got stopped by a police officer, he said, "I'm going to arrest you now." And I did not get the notice that there was a warrant for my arrest until after I got home.
Wow.
From being arrested, I didn't have to spend the night in jail, but I did get to see the inside of a jail. And it was fortunate that I was able to post bail and take care of the fee and explain what the problem was and get that all corrected. But what if I hadn't? What if I had not been able to do that?
That happens often.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And so I was lucky, but not everybody is as lucky as I was. And so simply the lack of having those disposable funds to be like, I'll take care of this $100 fee. It's no problem. Let's just take care of it. Not everybody can afford that. And so there's a lot of things that need to change in our justice system for it to really truly be just. And so those are the things that I just kind of think about as I have to do a lot of data reporting and boring spreadsheets and stuff like that, but keeping an eye on why am I here.
Right. And for purposes, and I'll use your language, of boring information is necessary. It's necessary. So thank you for doing that so that people understand. And let's just be real, most of us come from spaces where quantity is a justifier. However, in this conversation, we're talking about not just quantity, quality.
Mm-hmm.
The actual experiences, i.e., you having the disposable income and those that don't. And yeah, the assumption is that you can afford to do what you need to do, but a lot of people can't.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think that the bet is that a lot of people can't, because when we're talking about a specific demographics, if the system over time has been designed such that that demographic has been disenfranchised and is not, has not been able to take advantage of employment opportunities or educational opportunities. So by design, that particular demographic, the bet is that they won't be able to.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So
yeah, and it becomes this sort of self-perpetuating machine.
Right.
The state of Oklahoma, very recently, they've been going through. It's almost coming up on the end of the fiscal year, right? So Oklahoma has to balance the budget, and so the governor says, like, okay, well, I've got to make some cuts here, and I've got to move some money around here and there. And one of the things that was sacrificed was childcare. So the state of Oklahoma has gone from being able to support early childhood education from 70 million. Now it's going to be 7 million. So 10 times less. And so I can't get into the mind of the governor. I don't know what he's thinking, or any of his advisors, but it's this self-perpetuating problem of when you cut that support, now what's going to happen to those daycare providers that are taking care of the children while the mothers go to work, and who is this going to impact the most? Black, Latino, and immigrant populations, because they're the ones who need these services. They're the ones who need the daycare because they're the ones who have the shift jobs during the day, working in the restaurants, working in the hotels, working in all these places. And what's going to happen when they don't have any place to take their children? Now you're going to have all these people who don't have jobs because they can't afford daycare, childcare, and then what? Then they're going to end up in the criminal justice system. And so it just becomes this
vicious. Just
this
had this
vicious cycle.
conversation yesterday with an organization that does after school care, and we were talking about latchkey kids. So I was a latchkey kid, grew up in the Bay Area as well. And it was very clear, and I didn't become a latchkey kid until I was like fifth, sixth grade. And it was very clear that when I got home, these were the things I had to do, and do not open that door for anyone but God. And even if God came knocking at the door, you question, are you really God, and what do you want? Where that mentality now is not applicable. So as we are preparing for these kids that don't have care, be it daycare, after school care, and become latchkey kids, not confident that that same fear, and I don't necessarily want to use the word respect, of their parents telling them what to do is going to happen like it did in my generation.
And we had a different system too. There was community.
Yes.
There was community looked different. It felt different. It was experienced different. You may have had a key to your house and the responsibility as a kid to navigate getting yourself from school to home in a timely manner. And at the same time, there may have been, Mrs. Smith across the street keeping an eye out to make sure, because I know that your parents go to work and you're supposed to be getting home from school around this time frame. So, and if you were loitering, you also had Mr. Newton, our Mr. Newton, my Mr. Newton, kind of making sure that all the kids got home and were not loitering and hanging out. And if he did find you, he was calling somebody to make sure they knew where you were. So it was different too. The infrastructure was different.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of helicopter parenting where there is now. So I really feel like to compare the two is really comparing apples and oranges. And the question for me is like, it just presents a challenge for us to figure out what we do need to do in order to make this space safer for our kids and also viable for parents.
Yeah, so much of that community infrastructure is gone. I can remember growing up, and there were just, my friends were all the kids in the neighborhood. And so maybe my mom was at work and my dad was at work, but my friend Jeff, his mom was home, or we would go to this house or that house, our friends James or whoever it was, and it almost felt like it was the whole neighborhood was our parents,
That's right.
not just our parents.
100%.
And because all of us kids kind of ran around together, we felt safe. So I was never scared riding my bike home from school because I knew there was just all these people around me, that just made the neighborhood feel really safe because I knew them, And so if I was riding my bike to school or going out to play baseball or going here or there, I never felt, and my parents never felt, that I was in any danger or anything like that, But I think it's totally different today.
Carlos, as we're preparing to wrap up this interview and again, this podcast, and again, thank you for creating space for us. How do you see, what advice would you give folks that want to be involved in the community, their community? Because although there's definitely some national issues going on and
Yeah.
regional and state, how would you recommend people get involved in their community and weave in components of leadership?
Yeah. Yeah. I think about that a lot. And, um, you know, people have these like lofty things of like, run for school board and run for city council and these, of course, if that's, if you're called to do that, absolutely. But it's the little things too. I had, it's funny. I had these two little kids knock on my door this last weekend. They must have been about maybe 10, 11 years old. And they knocked on my door and they said, is there anything that we can do for you for work? We're trying to make some money. And at first I was like, no, I'm not interested in, kind of shoo, go away. But then for a second, I was like, you know what? I tell you what, I'll give you all $20. I've got these boxes where I used to have an herb garden. If you can get rid of all the weeds and clean out these boxes, I'll give you $20. And just in that, and they're like, okay. So they got to work. And I gave them some water and I gave them some candy. And, we had this nice little conversation. And I asked, do you live around here? And the kids said, yes, we live in those apartments that are right down the street. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder how many kids are in that apartment complex. And I wonder what their sort of outlets are in terms of like, do they have any adult mentors in their life? Do they have that sense that I had when I was their age of like, oh, this is a safe place that I can go to, or this is somebody who's an adult who's safe in my neighborhood, and just being that example, right? And it wasn't necessarily about them working, for, doing a little bit of gardening work for the money. That's not really what it was. Is let's have a let's just talk to each other and have a conversation so that they know, and they can come around anytime they want to, and maybe it's a way for them to get away from their apartment complex and just see more of their neighborhood, and what else could they do? What else could they get involved in their neighborhood that makes it feel like it's not such a scary, place. There was a little poster that was on a light post near my house that said, join our walking club on Sunday. And I thought, that's a cool idea. Just having a group of people to walk to the park, with. And that's community, You're just getting to know your neighbors. Um, and that's just such a huge, we forget about that, you know, uh, in all of the social media and kind of like what you said of like, all the things that are going on at the national and international level can get a little overwhelming, but it's like, yeah, if I can just get to know my neighbors a little better, then the world doesn't seem like such a scary place.
Well, I also love that, just the notion that it takes a micro moment to honor these kids' work ethic.
Mm.
Like that, it takes like just to honor that they had um, something within them, whether it was because
Yeah,
it was
right.
implanted in them
Yeah,
as
because
a
they could be at
child
home on
from
their
their
iPads,
parents,
right?
whether it's just part of their own instinct and makeup. But there is something that about them that said, well, we want to we want to do something, that has integrity. And for you to respond and honor that is a seed that probably will be, kind of nourished and will flourish and will support them in not being a statistic.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, agreed, and kudos to you. And just think, if out of every block in the community, if one or two people did that, not everyone, just
Oh,
one or two,
huge.
Right.
on a consistent basis.
Yeah. And now that I think about it, there was an elderly lady, and I must have been probably about 11 or 12 years old. There was an elderly lady in the community where I grew up, and she was like maybe 4 or 5 blocks from my house. And she was, up in age, and she needed somebody to water her garden every week. And so I would make a few dollars, doing that. And that's, again, I think that we kind of forget those kinds of things that are important in a neighborhood,
And it's important to our development as humans,
Yeah.
our humanity, and how we see ourselves, how we really cultivate a care for ourselves and a care for others.
Care for others. Yeah. Yeah.
It's really not about the money.
No, no. It was,
Well, it hit. Yeah, well, yeah, it is.
For the
The
kids.
money is it's important. Let's not discount that.
No,
It's not it may not be the primary
correct. That's what I'm
focus
saying.
for the entire lesson in life, but for them in that moment, it is.
Fair,
It's critical.
fair, fair,
It
fair.
is critical. So I won't dismiss that.
Agreed, and didn't mean for it to come off as dismissive. I was leaning more from the adult. I'm leaning more of, because I think I heard you say it's two boys.
yeah.
So
Right.
two boys being mentored by a man. Two boys who, as Carlos said, probably could be sitting on their iPads in the apartment building. However, chose to um, have the confidence and the bravery to knock
Mm-hmm.
on somebody's door and say, "Hey, we're trying to raise money for whatever. Do you need help with that, 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 that?" And then Carlos initially saying, "Go away," but thinking, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, here's an opportunity. Pause. Let's revisit this." So hear you, Dr. R, and agree, because there are multiple things going on from different lenses, from the kids definitely, and for the adult as well.
Mm-hmm.
And leaning into, just if a couple adults per block would do that on a consistent basis,
Yeah.
I
Right.
think we would just see a much richer community, maybe even the communities that we grew up in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And last, Carlos, one of your favorite books.
Oh,
And
my
and
favorite book.
oh, wait a minute, you have a favorite?
A favorite book.
I'm listening.
called The Never-Ending Story. The author is Michael Ende, E-N-D-E. He's German. So he, at the time, this was kind of like his breakout hit, but he had several books, and he was a fantasy writer. He was kind of German. He was kind of Germany's like Tolkien. So Britain had J.R. Tolkien, Germany had Michael Ende. And the Never Ending, so it's a cheesy 80s movie, and you might remember it.
I do.
And there's a luck dragon, and there's an empress, and the boy, goes into the book and lives in the world of this book. But when my dad gave me this book to read, I just devoured it, and I kept reading it as a child over and over and over and over and over again. I must have read that book 10, 12 times. I still have multiple copies, and I don't read a word of German, but I have a copy of the original German. I think the reason I love the book so much is because of its theme, which is basically that you can create the world that you want to live in from your thoughts and intentions. And there's a medallion that they wear, and it's a symbol of like you can make this world that you want to live in. And on the back of the medallion it says, do what you wish. So I just think that's I've always kind of lived with that kind of mantra. And it's interesting, the movie is only half the book. Like the movie ends right as the book is getting good, actually. And so if you've seen the movie and it's like, yeah, it's this cheesy 80s movie with the traumatic scene of the horse passing away in the swamp. And by the way, it's
Spoiler
the
alert.
scene
Too late.
yeah, spoiler alert, a trigger alert, all the alerts. And I'll give another one. Like that scene in the book is so much more traumatic, if you can imagine that, than it is in the movie. The movie's bad enough, and like you'll see all these memes on the internet about like I have childhood trauma from seeing this scene in the movie. It's so much worse in the book because the horse speaks.
Oh, wow.
And you can hear what is going on in the mind of this horse.
Interesting.
As the horse is essentially, like, big spoiler alert, as the horse is like choosing to sacrifice his own life. It's a crazy scene, and that's stuck with me too. But it's a great book. It's my favorite book.
So I had no idea it was a book. I remember the movie. The song is now in my head. So thank you, Carlos.
It's going to be in your head all week.
And thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
This has been really cool. Very hopeful, and choose to believe that listeners will see anthropology as a way to be an advocate, as a way to be a leader, to be community leaders, and just a way to be involved. Very committed to helping people understand that anthropology is not just for higher education, it's for everyday living.
Yeah, right.
All right. Dr. R, thank you again for your time. Carlos, again, great to see you. And everyone, thank you for listening, and we'll see you again next time. All right. Bye, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Bye.